You may call yourself future-focused, but are you really evolving as fast as the world around you, or just rearranging the past? With Eric McNulty, Harvard-affiliated leadership speaker and the co-author of Crisis, Change and How to Lead When It Matters Most, we challenge the myth of episodic change and invite you to lead up, down, across, and inside out so you can shape the future instead of being shaped by crisis. Like this episode, subscribe to our channel, and DM Future to continue the conversation. My name is Arjan Visser, human-centered futurist and your host. Eric, welcome to the All Journey podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
So am I. I'm really curious where we intersect in our expertise, and I would love to hear that. And so I want to start actually with a question to set the scene. And that is, what if authentic leadership isn't just about knowing who you are, but also anticipating and discerning what's coming?
Well, I think you got two pieces there. I think there's the authentic piece, which is what people interpret as being the internal and being who you are. And then the leadership, which to me is very much about the future and understanding what's around you. And I think that the authenticity, and there's a lot of debate about this right now, of how authentic should you be. The other thing is you need to be who you are and who people need you to be. And it's getting that balance correct. And so, in the work that I do, we talk about three kinds of intelligence or awareness. There is self-awareness and self-intelligence. There's other awareness and other intelligence, with the other people who are involved in what's going on. And there's contextual awareness or contextual intelligence of not just what's happening, but what's likely to happen next. And so I think as a leader, you've always got to be looking forward and anticipating how it's going to change and how it's going to change you through that. So it's a constantly evolving dynamic.
Yeah, and in the old dialogue and in the podcast, we always explore that dynamic about authentic leadership, and we often talk about how it is so much involved in alignment, and not just alignment with our environment, but actually the alignment with who we are becoming, and what we will bring forth. And I love how you say it's so important with leadership that you need to know your authentic self, both from who you are and who you are becoming, but also there needs to be this alignment with what's the authentic self that's needed in your surrounding. And hopefully that doesn't give a clash, because then you're probably in the wrong surrounding.
That's right. No, you're right. And that's where I think, again, we look at alignment often as external alignment. I need my people aligned. I need my functions aligned. And I think that rarely happens. I mean, you can get alignment at a very high level, but then there still needs to be a lot of more harmony because people are engaged in and reacting to different forces in the environment. But that alignment between who you are internally and who you're projecting externally has got to be there. And that to me is the essence of authenticity. Do I see the person? Do I believe it's you, or are you pretending? Are you acting? Are you faking? Trying to make it up? And that, I think the most effective leaders understand that, and they realize that yes, there's a certain amount of performance to leading. You have to, in some cases, be demonstrative, be confident, be self-assured, even when you may be rather frightened inside. But they have to feel like they're getting the real you. And then you can say things like, I don't know, I'm not sure. Here's what we're trying to figure out. And if they feel like they're, we humans are a social species, right? And we're highly attuned to trust. And can we trust the other party we're engaged with? And as soon as we detect that there could be some untrustworthiness there, the alarm bells go off. And we begin to pull back. I mean, we physiologically pull back and psychologically. So if you're leading and need people to be engaged and moving forward in some kind of alignment, you've got to do that internal work first and be able to do it in a way that is appropriate for the role of leading, but that is true to yourself and who you're trying to be.
So you make already the distinction between that authenticity doesn't function, and people will feel it, sense it, smell it,
Mhm.
if you're faking something, if you're showing up different than who you are.
Right.
And probably they smell it before you are self-aware enough to recognize it. And at the other end, there's also the strategic foresight, like scanning the horizon. And in a way, that gives a huge tension with authentic leadership. So, how does it strengthen our authentic leadership to have more strategic foresight, to be, I would not say better equipped, but actually more skilled in applying it? How does it strengthen us rather than make it even more complex?
Well, to me, the real strength in strategic foresight is beginning to acknowledge what you don't know. People often say, "Okay, we're looking for." They've got projections, they've got plans. Here's what's going to happen. Well, we really don't know what's going to happen. We have some ideas, and if you're using the tools and the concepts of strategic foresight appropriately, I think you're developing hypotheses. And knowing what those hypotheses are, what the evidence is you're seeing this, what are the inklings you've got about what might happen next, and also acknowledging what you don't know, that brings vulnerability into the equation. Because you're not just stating, here's my plan, here's my vision, here's what we're going to do, or here's what's going to happen. It is, here's what we think the possibilities are. Here's what the signs we're looking for to see if this may go in this direction or that direction. Uh, and here's what we don't know, and here's what we're not seeing. I think asking those negative space questions are really important, and that's when you begin to get that, I think, a greater depth of strategic foresight. But as an individual, as a leader, that does you're admitting some vulnerability, and that, to me, it signals authenticity when you're willing to say, "I'm not sure, I don't know. Here are the questions I have. Here's the hypothesis I have." And when you're willing to admit that vulnerability, that's when people say, "Oh, you know what? Maybe I can trust that person." And so that authenticity makes you much more believable, much more someone people are willing to follow than the person who tries to lead by getting up with great certainty and say, failure is not an option, or this is what's going to happen, and we know exactly how it's going to play out. And we know any student of history or current events knows that things don't go exactly as planned pretty much ever. And it's how we anticipate and react to them that really matters.
Exactly. And I think this is already uh, a, a gemstone that you just share. Like when we do strategic foresight and we scan the horizon, we don't know who we will be when we get there.
Yes.
The biggest pitfall is to judge what we sense that's coming based on our perception of what we have learned in the past. That's would be like a new definition of stupidity, but still this is common practice. This happens a lot because, like you said, we don't want to acknowledge that we don't know. We are afraid to be vulnerable. And with preparing and anticipating the future, those are really not virtues. They make you authentic.
Yeah, I think it is. We too often separate the external from the internal, and this is we could have a long conversation going back to, I think, sort of Enlightenment thinkers of separating man from nature. But this notion of strategic foresight being all about the external. You say you're looking at the horizon, we're looking at the windshield or looking with binoculars, trying to see way out into the distance. And yes, and you're also trying to look internally and say, how will I be shaped by this? How will I be changed? How will the people around me be changed by these various futures we're envisioning? And this is it's a coevolution. We are a product of our environment. We are going to be shaped by our environment as we are going to help shape the environment. So it's a bit of a dance. And I think too often we forget the internal piece and realize and be thinking about who do I want to be when I get to that future? Who do I hope to be? And then see who you actually are. Because you're right. I mean, creates an avoidable blind spot, I guess is the term I would use, when you assume that you'll be the same now as you will be a year from now or 2 years from now, because you won't. None of us are.
Yeah. So it's actually we talk about strategic foresight. But to check if that's completely covering that dimension, maybe it's best to just separate the horizontal foresight and the vertical alignment of personal growth, our maturity, our capacity expansion, and then try to find a way, an authentic way to actually use both dimensions and find our authentic leadership on the intersection of those two. But how can we do that?
It it's a lot of work. I mean, let's face it, it takes a lot of intentionality and a lot of discipline. I know in the work that I do at Harvard, we use a framework of meta leadership, META as the prefix there, meaning so taking a broader view. And we talk about leading up to your boss or those to whom you report, down to the team you lead, across to your peers, and beyond to external stakeholders. I think the piece we missed as well that you point out is leading in, and thinking about how do you lead yourself. And I think that there are, asking yourself the question, and part of it is not forgetting or remembering, I guess would be the easier way to say it, remembering to ask those internal questions and carving out some time for reflection, for introspection, for asking yourself those questions. Who do I want to be? What wants to happen? Who am I going to need to be in this future? Am I the person to do it, or somebody else? And so taking the time to do that, but I think again, and it's very, very hard to do this because we're so used to dichotomies that that internal and external work is inseparable, yet we try and separate it.
You use the word dance, and probably my wife will laugh about this because I'm not known as a dancer at all. No, maybe I move a bit left and right on music. But this sounds like a tango. In a tango, both lead, and so like you say in the framework you use, you lead up to your boss. You lead actually up to those who await your clarity.
Mhm.
You lead up horizontal to your peers or to the horizontal foresight, what's emerging, and at the same time you lead from the inside out.
Yeah.
And probably there is in the vertical alignment also your interaction with your source of life, what's bigger than us,
Mhm.
that that shapes us, that grants us our rebirth in our development. So that's already like four dimensions. um it is complex,
Mhm.
but like you stated, if we ignore the complexity, we probably going to camp out in our own blind spot.
We do, and I think that one of the ways to think about it, and one of the ways I think it helps inspire people to do the work is to talk about relevance. That part of what makes you highly relevant as a leader is your ability to anticipate what is coming. Because if you can see it faster sooner, you can begin to adapt sooner and make all the appropriate changes and begin to get ready for that and to be ready to make the changes required. If, however, you don't change, you become less relevant, because it is you were the person who saw it. That's great. When it gets here, are you the person who's going to be able to lead through it? That's not a given. And so, if you want to remain relevant and resonant as a leader, you've got to be evolving as much as the context around you is evolving. Now, obviously, there are some things like core values and core principles that may stay largely the same through this. They may evolve more slowly, uh, but a lot of other your external behaviors, your decisions, your actions, which are the things you control as a leader, they've got to evolve to fit the context as it's emerging. And if you don't, again, you become less relevant than you were before, and that's not a place you wanna be in. It's not does not equip you to be able to continue to lead.
Yeah, and in general, we hear that we change by the uh, rapidly changing world around us. Um, but I think you talk not just about adaptability. I think you talk about something way deeper, and that's you will not be relevant if
Mhm.
you're not changing from the inside out, and make sure the circumstances, the organization around you evolves too. because that's where the vertical leadership influences the horizontal leadership, and where horizontal foresight is not revealing just the path, but it's changed from the inside out, that you change the direction of the path.
That's right.
So it comes more to that you bring forth with an expression of identity, your authenticity, into something that matters, that creates substance, if it's organizational or just great solutions. And that's something different than just achieving.
Yes, it very much is, and this is where I think when one of the things I push back about regularly is the notion that change is episodic. It's the old model of unfreeze, change, refreeze, thinking as if change, only happens when we want it to, or only happens during a prescribed period. And it doesn't. Change happens all the time. And that's where equipping ourselves for that and equipping the organization for that, the people around us, for that notion that change is always happening. It's not a bad thing. If we can anticipate and adapt appropriately, it can be a very good thing, and not and take some of the fear out of it. I think that's in talking about it in a way that we are looking to be more fluid, more adaptable. And the whole process of evolution through which we have survived on this planet and other species have survived has been changing form to preserve function, to becoming fit for the environment. That's what people often misinterpret Darwin, thinking survival of the fittest meant the one with the biggest muscles. And that wasn't the kind of fit he was talking about. It was fit for purpose. And so as the environment around you changes, you've got to continue to develop that. And that's where I think the charge for leaders and for their organizations is to be continually developing their people, and developing these skills in them, not just in a select group of, oh, there's the foresight team. No, you may have specialists who can go really deep on this and do very sophisticated analysis, but you want to have some of this in everybody, so everybody is noticing what's changing and how you may need to adapt. And that may be you know, your uh, your cleanup crew, your front desk person, all kinds of people at different parts of the organization will notice things. And if those aren't being surfaced to see if they're significant or not, you're missing potential signals of how the environment is going to change, and you as an organization may no longer be relevant. And that's a real problem. I know that Sidney Finkelstein, who's up at Dartmouth, he and his team did research on the about 150 large corporate failures around the world. And a great book called "Why Smart Executives Do Stupid Things," I think was the title. And in that book, every failure they looked at, the signals or the signs of where the failure would come from were there to be seen if only you stopped to look. But we have lots of things that limit our ability to perceive. We get focused on what's happening now, what's generating profit right now, where our rewards are coming from, and we miss some of these signals. But they were in every single case, the signals were there to be seen if only you were attuned enough to notice them. And so I think that's where we need to build our organizations to be sense and respond organisms. And so we are continually bringing in information, sorting it for relevance and for significance, and then and being willing to ask the hard questions about what's coming, because it may not fit what we're planning to do right now. We may have to change small ways, big ways, but to make it an ongoing process, because that's the way the world works.
Just listening to it and processing it at the same time. It's um, those corporations, in a way, they failed because they didn't take the time to look ahead. They missed because they didn't prioritize it. They
Mhm.
didn't anticipate. They didn't discern. And then, in a way, it had me think of the Eisenhower quadrant, which, if you ignore it, it always collapses in that important things become urgent. And that sets you up for disaster. That sets you up for burnout. Because you don't want to be triggered by urgency. You want to be focused on what is important. And
Mhm.
there still will be urgent things. There always will be circumstances that we didn't predict correctly, or we didn't anticipate or prepared fully for. But in general, seeing the signals and not as something to fight, but to spot the opportunity and identify what good can come out of it, really brings me to that actually we should not wait with foresight when it's urgent, when there is crisis or disruption, but actually we should be able to find a way how we can maintain our authentic expression of who we are, making hard and strategic decisions ahead of uncertain times.
Absolutely, and I think this is where, again, the crisis work that I have done through the National Preparedness Leadership Initiative at Harvard, many of the people who do the crisis work for a living do a lot of preparedness. And yes, there's the planning piece and there is the protocols and all of that. They're very important. But it's also the emotional work. Because I think one of the challenges when you get to that really urgent moment is you get pushed into urgency. And if you aren't prepared to deal with it emotionally, then you really can get off balance and start making bad decisions because you're floundering a bit. And until you've experienced what that is going to feel like, because when you experience it and you are truly are ready for it, you can slow things down. That's one of the most important things to do in a crisis is to understand what really is urgent. If the building is burning, yes, you have to get out and and get the people out and put out the fire. But in a less immediate crisis, financial crisis, other things that are going on, it's really important to be able to slow and get to the right pace and understand what time you have to make which decisions. Where do you have time to consult or look around and see what the second or tertiary implications may be? But to exert some control over time and how you spend time is really essential. And that being able to slow things down, to calm people down, gets people into a place where they are less reacting and more responding. And that's when you're going to be able to do your best work. If everyone's just in a panicked reaction, there'll be a lot of urgency. There'll be a lot of things that happen fast, and there'll be a lot of things that won't go well because of it. You want to do what you want to do fast, what has to be done fast, and what doesn't have to be fast, you want to do at the appropriate pace. And I think that's sort of the essence of the Eisenhower quadrants is not getting consumed by the urgency because people will always be pushing you that their thing is the most urgent. This is the most important thing. You got to deal with it right now. And being able to exert some control over that is is important. And when you can do that, when you can, again, part of your authentic leadership, you're able to do that well. I think people really look to you and say, "Okay, this is a voice of reason in the room, a voice of somebody we can bring this to, who will help us figure it out, and who won't just join the panic." And that's people are looking for leadership, and that's when you can be the leader they hope you can be.
Yeah, emotional steadiness. I mean, a personal growth, leadership coaching. Uh, I always push a little bit on like, how have you organized your self governance?
Hmm.
Because it's not a question if life will hit you; it's just when life will hit you. And when life hits you, does it take you off guard, put you in an imbalance? Because in personal growth, you will fall back all the way to survival mode.
Yes.
And then you make the decisions based on lack, short term. So the horizon is not there. So before you know, you consume or self sabotage. And you could have prevented it
Right.
if you knew how to look in the mirror and
Mhm.
remind yourself, this is who I am. This is our strategic direction. This is the perspective we have. This is the mindset. You know, not just labels, but really like articulated substance or to govern yourself from falling through all your thresholds of your growth. And as a leader, you will fall in the spotlight of everyone. Then
Mhm.
it's no longer vulnerability because it becomes a disaster because those people will take a distance.
Mhm.
Their trust is hurt. They will fall to survival mode as well. And then everyone is just running around in panic. And it could have been prevented if you
Abs
knew how to self governance.
That's right. And one of the things I always tell people is that you can't always prevent the first crisis. You can't provide the severe weather or whatever the precipitating event is. You can't always prevent that, but you can always prevent the secondary crisis of a failed response. So if you stumble, if you make you make the first few steps and they're good, you get ahead and things get better over time. If you stumble and make some own goals or some self errors, then you have a really hard time catching up. So be thinking about that. Um, you know, again, understanding what a real crisis is. Is it really existential, or is it just a bad situation you have to manage through? And you say, what are you going to do? And I always ask leaders, and I also and ask the organization, how are you going to be at your best when things are at their worst? And that's likely going to be about relationships, your relationship with yourself and your relationship to others, levels of trust, levels of the ability to actually work together and wrestle with what could be some very big and difficult decisions that may have moral or ethical implications, may have long-term implications for the organization. How are you doing that now so that when you have to do it under pressure, it's not something new, but it's something you are comfortable with? And yes, perhaps you do feel the consequences are higher, but you're not afraid of that. You go out and do that. When you look at I talked to several people who help train Olympic athletes, and we've recently been through the Winter Olympics, and those people know how to use pressure to their advantage and not turn it into stress. Right, the fact that they're at the world spotlight on them, the cameras are there, the stakes are high, the medals are on the line. They go out and do their best. And that's because I think they're able to use pressure as a positive force and look at it as a good thing. But they've also rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed. So it isn't your first time down that giant mountain try to ski a slalom when it's worse, but you've done it a lot of times. So you know yourself, your body, you know your equipment, you know a bit about the weather and the context and how you're going to react. And that's when it becomes almost instinctual. Those learned behaviors are so ingrained, and that's the people who handle crisis really well, who've done that work. And you can't there aren't shortcuts. You can't skip it. You can't read it in a book. You can't get it. You can't come to one of my classes and get it in a day. You've got to actually do the work.
Yeah, immediately what comes to mind is that during a good crisis, the real leaders are born. And I think that is just a myth. I wouldn't
Yes.
even call it a lie because yes, but the great leaders, and we already talked about the dimensions of leadership, which just makes us all a born leader,
Hmm.
or incompetent. So we it's I think it's about being intentional about who you are becoming, about how you shape your future, regardless where you are in an organization or in society. You have to be intentional yourself. Because if great leaders would be born during a good crisis, then great leadership depends on accidents.
Right.
And we are not accidentally becoming a great leader. It has to do with intention. So actually it's about taking charge of our own future so we can lead up in all those dimensions.
I think you're right, and there are. I think when you look at the people that they say, "Oh, leaders were born," well, look at their early life, look at the experiences they've been through. There's a lot of development there, and with there's often someone who has helped people do the internal work and understand what they're going through, because you can go through some very difficult things, but if you don't learn from them and begin to build that resilience, then that experience is wasted. So it's not a matter of popping out of the birth canal with all the right stuff or going to the right school. It is about learning those lessons and learning how to take both the good and particularly the bad and build that into who you are. Take the lessons from it and realize that we do change over time. Nobody gets through life unscathed, but what you decide to do about it is what will determine the value you get out of that experience and what you can carry forward as a leader. And how much you realize that and how much you're willing to share that, I think, is another part of the equation.
You said something, and I heard it between the lines. Um, like those natural born leaders, they don't inspire. So it's a form of leadership, and we maybe we confuse that we envy them
Mhm.
that with inspiration. And we need to be good leadership inspires us. And we already said we only feel attracted to good leadership when it's healthy, when it's authentic. And that's lived through, that's embodied. They walk it,
Yes.
and they're not talking it or giving you access to a format or a scheme or a process. No, they walk it, and their walk is inspirational. And those people, they're not reacting to disruption. They have been intentional about their own personal growth, their
Mm.
own development, and they shape the future. So let's explore how we can be intentionally shaping our future. What are the thinking tools that we should not put aside when we have time left, but actually make part of our core focus?
Well, I think that the reflection piece is important, and not enough people build regular reflective practices into their routine. So, what am I going through? What am I learning from it? What am I curious about? What was unexpected? What didn't go as well as I had hoped? But asking those questions, building it into a routine. But I think also thinking forward of who do I hope to be, not in terms of achievement, not in terms of I want to be the CEO or whatever, but who do I hope to be as a person, and how am I investing in myself to get there? One of these, my business, because I teach and I speak and I write. I have in my personal manifesto in my journal that quality output requires 3 to 5x quality input. Remind me to have conversations like you and I have had, to read widely, to listen, because I can't be this. What I share doesn't come spouting out of my head just because I was born with it. It's because there's a lot going in, and I try and connect the dots and share what I think is relevant. And I think that we as leaders have to be doing that work as well, and be thinking about, if you want the be able to harvest the fruit during a crisis or during any pivotal time, you've got to do the gardening ahead of time, right? You got to plant the right seeds, you got to take care of them, and that's yourself, and that's physically, mentally, psychologically. And so I think that is building it into it. And I think that I think at least in the U.S. we built a system where we think that sort of stops about when you leave your MBA program. You've sort of done all your development, now go do, and you've gotten to a certain point, but you got a lot more to go. And so seeing it as a continual lifelong process, and as I'll try to remember the name of the gentleman who first said this, and I will think of it in a moment. He wrote a book called Kenneth Mickelson said, "It isn't just lifelong learning; it's life deep learning too." Which I thought was really smart, because that means, again, going deep into who you are as a person, who you are as a leader, who you are as a citizen, and seeing that as a continual, ongoing process that should go on till the day you die, is one way of equipping yourself to continually be learning, continually be curious, and continuing, hopefully, to getting better at living into who you potentially could be.
Yeah, so move away from just giving expression and
Yeah,
meeting expectation to the inner formation of who you are. And I like with the reflection, not just reflect on what you don't want and then think you can design what you want, but actually focus on what you want to gain,
yeah,
and use your imagination, not to just explore the horizon, but try to picture yourself on the horizon, and then use your genius brain to spin it around 360 degrees. Your imagination can look at the other side of the moon too.
that's right.
You just have to try it. And not only when there is a crisis, when there is urgency, but actually make it part of that deep learning. That's not a moment in the calendar. It's
Yes,
actually an ongoing, it's breathe in, breathe out.
that's
And
right.
but that is really a change. Like you mentioned, the MBA. And I remember from my role in corporate life, all the trainings were done in a in a training environment, and then after the training environment, you were applying what you learned in the same environment. But that's not how life works. I've got 3 sons, and they grow up in our family setting, and everything they hopefully learn from us, they will apply in a different setting called the world. So
Yes.
there is no training setting you take with you. You take the skill with you, and you leave the format and the context behind and know how to apply it in another context. It's called life. And it's like we forgot that in the way we train people their actually we only train them their skills.
Right. We only train skills. Yes.
Yeah, that's
And
the I think
and
that's
that's
the
that's the
thing.
hard part, and that is where, um, bringing your whole person to work, which I think is somewhat performative in a lot of cases. But you're right, you have to do that whole person development and not just skills and not just learning a framework. That's in a way the easy stuff. It's developing the wisdom and the judgment that come with time and come with experience. And that's when you're continually learning from what you're going through this thing called life. You get one shot here, and what are you learning as you go along? That is how you develop character and wisdom and judgment. And at the end of the day, that's, I think, what we look for in leaders are those three things. We look for character, we look for wisdom, we look for judgment.
And that starts with that you take your whole self to your work. But it also means that work is not a productivity scene. It
Yes.
becomes a personal growth scene.
Yes. Which
So
is not the case in many places. You get measured on productivity and how many widgets can you turn out or how many steps in the process can you execute today, not how much can you grow. Um,
yeah. And then character doesn't become character, it actually becomes virtues, and we measure it as virtues as well.
yes.
Then we are ready and we are fully equipped to start faking ourselves, and we are back to square one in our conversation.
That's right. That's right. And I think that is, again, I and this is a broader social commentary, but I think that, in the corporate setting, we don't often think about training for character, for example, or training for judgment. We think about training for skills because someone else was supposed to train for character. That was your parents or your church or your school was supposed to give you those things. But in many cases, those aren't developed there either, or they're partially developed and they can continue. But um, I think really investing people who understand themselves and are bought into something larger in life, and even larger than this quarter's productivity, gives you the people who will find the next idea, who really take care of your customers, who will find the inefficiencies in your processes, who will get you the things you're looking for. We just don't. We're going too far downstream. We need to go further upstream. I think in equipping people who are critical thinkers, who are, again, good human beings, and in create an environment where they thrive. And when you do that, and you're doing work that is meaningful, you're unstoppable at that point.
I think that's a great insight. Now, do not separate what's meaningful and how we mature
Mhm.
from our mastery. And that makes our mastery not just skill based, but actually it makes our mastery that we carry the responsibility that we can carry, because that's supported with our authentic leadership, with our authentic self. And then we start to see skills as preparation, as training to carry responsibility and actually create life for those around us.
That's right.
And that sounds so easy, but I can imagine someone is listening to our podcast and thinking like, okay, you got me. You convinced me that I have been being reactively in my leadership, in how I led life, going from crisis to crisis, from external trigger to trigger, rather than having foresight. So, what is the first shift? And I think it's including me as well. What's the first shift I can make?
I think the first shift is to think. That's a really good question, actually. I want to get you're asking for the first one, so I'm going to try and give you the most thoughtful answer I can. Um, I think the most important shift, or the first shift, is to get into that yes and mindset. And by that, I mean it is me, yes, and it is you. It is the present and it is the future. It is me and it is us. And seeing your choices as additive and embracing the and as opposed to the or the but. And that may seem rather simple, but I think that it can be on one level it's very simple, and on one level it's quite complex. And so making that, and then I always talk about making the me to we shift. That this if you are leading, it is not about you, and it's all about you. It's about you in the context of we and us, and how do we unlock the power and potential of all the people who are around us, who have the potential to contribute. And so when you start looking at the world in through with that lens, and we're so uh, assertively pushed toward individual achievement, individual accomplishment, even in leadership roles, at least here in the U.S. We see that when it really is, what do we do? If you're leading, it's not about you getting across the finish line. It's about how many others do you help across the finish line. And so when you see the world in those terms, I think you find new possibility, you see new ways to overcome challenges, and it amplifies the impact you can have when you're leading.
Yeah, it's about us. It's about you and I,
Yeah.
and to get under that, I would nearly say a rigid structure of that it's about someone else or expectation, and to get to the place where it's about you and I, you need to find out who you are. So it becomes about I, not in the selfish, but who am I? Who am I becoming? What can I bring forth? Because that's what you take with you to be a partner in the you and I. In
Yes.
short, stop thinking and postponing your personal growth, because it's the least selfish thing to do. Grow yourself, reduce your blind spot, and bring forth what you uniquely can carry.
No, I think you're right. And I think when you do that with the understanding that everything and everyone is connected, it becomes less a selfish pursuit and it becomes what I call enlightened selflessness, right? You are aware that you are changing the world and the world is being changed by you. And you have a choice as to what kind of change you want to make, to paraphrase the late Dr. Jane Goodall. I mean, every day you make a difference and you get to decide what kind of difference you're going to make. And only if you take care of yourself and develop yourself can you develop others, which is an important job of leading. And so again, seeing it that in that less in a selfless rather than selfish frame helps you understand why you do it and how to do it more effectively.
Yeah, effectively and not more efficient.
Yes, efficiency is a false god. More effectively.
Yeah, impact. So, Eric, how can people connect with you and explore more of you and your work?
They can find me on LinkedIn, Eric McNulty. I'm pretty visible there. You can also find me at ericmcnulty.com, my website, which will soon be updated, but it is my home base there in the contact form. But otherwise, LinkedIn is the best way to reach out to me, and I post there often. Love to get comments. That's how you and I met, was via LinkedIn, and so I like to have good conversations there. So I look forward to any of your listeners or viewers reaching out, and I want to hear their perspectives.
Thank you. And I will make sure that in the description of our podcast, your LinkedIn profile is mentioned and your website as well. So, and I really encourage everyone to connect, and you never know where it leads to, at least it's growth. So to close our podcast, our conversation, what are the three takeaways that we want to give our listeners?
I think that it's important, and thank you for setting this up in the questions, is that notion of the horizontal and the vertical, and that those two are intricately linked. You have to do the internal and the external world work simultaneously, understanding that you will have an influence on the future, but the future will have an influence on you. I think secondly, to think of leading as a future-oriented activity. I always say leading is bringing people into an uncertain future with hope, confidence, and agency. You've got to be looking forward. It's just not about today. And the third one is take care of yourself, develop yourself. You own your own development. And the only way you can be good for others is to be good to yourself in that way, and continue to be curious, never stop asking questions, and get out there and keep doing that and encouraging others as well. Because if you develop those around you, you'll build a formidable team that can accomplish even overcome the most daunting challenges, and will find opportunities because there's a lot emerging right now in the world, and you want to be able to do that. So invest in others as you invest in yourself.
Thank you for sharing them. And I think in between we mentioned already you have to lead.
Yes,
You lead upstream, you lead downstream, you lead inside, you lead outside. And it's not a reactive following,
that's right.
you know.
That's right. And not to be too self-promotional, but if you want some of the insights my colleagues and I have had around this, go pick up our book, You're It, Crisis Change and How to Lead When It Matters Most. It's got some good tools and frameworks that do help you with the internal and the external work. But that's a good primer on the work that we have done particularly around crisis, that I think is useful for any executive now or any person, because we all have to be ready to be crisis leaders because we live in these turbulent times.
I want to thank you, Eric, for all your wisdom and insights.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate you having me on, and thank you for crafting such an interesting conversation. You asked terrifically provocative questions.
Yes, and I also want to thank all our listeners who tuned in and stayed with us to the end. And I really trust that this conversation resonated, and I hope it even provoked you and sparked something meaningful for your own journey. And if it did, share it in the comments below. We love to read your reflections and engage with you. And if you don't want to wait for next week's episode, and you are ready to explore the future with us, you are invited to join the Alt Dialogue, an exclusive peer dialogue for visionary leaders to pioneer and ponder those authentic leadership transformation questions that shape our leadership for a future together. Just DM future, and we will send